Jeremy Johnson, dramaturg at Houston Grand Opera, and welcome to HGO Digital's live pre-show. For those of you who have been with us before, welcome back, and for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome to our pre-show event. I hope you have a great time learning a bit more about our digital programming. This is the place where we will introduce you to tonight's performance and give you some background on what you will see and hear. The main event begins at 7:30 Central on hgo.org/digital or through our partners at Marquee TV, so make sure you're ready to watch on one of those two platforms. Tonight's recital features soprano Jeanine de Bique, conductor Patrick Summers, and members of the Houston Grand Opera Orchestra. All of our other recital releases this season have been filmed live in the Cullen Theater. But now at this time of year, we're so happy to have members of the HGO Orchestra play in this concert under the baton of Maestro Summers. So this concert was filmed in the Brown Theater in order to socially distance our fabulous orchestra. And there's no greater collection of repertoire to showcase them, along with the phenomenal soprano Jeanine de Bique in the stunning music of Handel, Mozart, and a composer perhaps unknown to many classical music lovers, Heinrich Graun. We'll talk about Graun and the rest of the repertoire as we get to know this concert in tonight's pre-show. This recital, like all of our HGO Digital presentations, is generously underwritten by Sarah and Ernest Butler. We're deeply grateful for their support. We couldn't have done it without them. The recital will go live at 7:30 Central, but first, let me take a minute to remind all of you watching here on Facebook or YouTube that this video you're watching now, if you're hearing me say these words, this video is not where the concert is going to take place. This is our pre-show stream. The concert itself will be streamed on HGO's website and through Marquee TV. So you have three options for watching the recital. One, download the Marquee TV app on your smart device. Two, go directly to marquee.tv in a web browser. Or three, go to hgo.org/digital. If you aren't already signed up on one of those platforms, you'll need to create a free login on either of the websites to access tonight's performance free of charge. So make sure you're logged in and ready to go. If you have any questions or comments during the pre-show tonight, feel free to type them into the comment boxes directly on Facebook or YouTube. We'll be able to see them and respond on here live. So now let's talk a little bit more about tonight's program. Soprano Jeanine de Bique was scheduled to make her HGO debut this spring in a new production of Rodgers and Hammerstein's hit musical, The Sound of Music, singing the role of Maria Rayner. Of course, when the season was canceled and we pivoted to HGO Digital, we still wanted to showcase this extraordinary artist. Jeanine is one of those artists where technical ability and musical inspiration are driven to absolute greatness, and we're thrilled to have her as part of our HGO Digital season. We had a chance to sit down and ask Jeanine some questions while she was in town, and here's what she said when asked how she got started as a singer.
I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, and my country is very rich in its culture, diversity, and folklore background. I grew up and was raised as an Anglican, so I sang many English tunes at church, which are a part of the classical tradition and the classical form. My parents put my sisters and I through piano lessons. We were all involved in choir at school. We did tennis, ballet, gymnastics, you name it. We took part in art classes. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have several different competitions, which is a healthy competitions for the school system. One of them being the Trinidad and Tobago Music Festival, and also Sandfest, which takes part in the south of the island, which is where I was born. And I took part in those competitions whilst I was at school, in both piano and voice, solo voice, duets, trios, choir, and was very successful in those competitions. When we moved to the north of the island and I changed schools, secondary schools, at the age of 16, we had a new choir director that came in, and she was a soprano that studied at the Royal College of Music in London. She heard me and invited me to take lessons with her in order to participate as a soloist in a different age group category in the Trinidad and Tobago Music Festival. So I started taking lessons with her, and my piano teacher, I continued also with her. And around the age of 18, when you graduate from secondary school, you obviously have to make a choice as to what is going to be your next step for employment and work. And they encouraged me to take a look at furthering my studies in music, both piano and voice. So they encouraged me to look at the schools in America, and from there, that's where it really began.
Janine made her HGO debut last week at the My Favorite Things socially distanced sing-along at the University of Houston TDECU Stadium. But before My Favorite Things went up on the football field, Jeanine recorded this concert in the Brown Theater with Patrick and members of the HGO Orchestra. The concert features music from the Baroque and Classical eras, which Jeanine and Patrick both connect to musically and artistically.
Patrick and I have a love affair and an adoration of Baroque and Mozart. So it was very easy to come up with something. I mean, we got on the phone. I don't know. That conversation could have gone on for ages with the repertoire that we could come up with to do for this concert. But we had to choose, in order for the time slot of 90 minutes, what would be the most appropriate thing, and also what would showcase us best in this concert. So we laid everything out on the table, and we came up with, I think, some really excellent selections for this show.
There really are some excellent selections. I know you're going to love them. We'll talk about the music in just a moment. But first, here are Janine's comments on the composers featured tonight.
Handel and I have a love affair. Absolutely. He and I together. And my new composer that I'm beginning to probably cheat on Handel with is Graun. And that's his contemporary, so don't tell him. His music is quite intricate and very sophisticated. And he's becoming a composer not to overlook. So, yes.
Well, tonight, Handel still comes out on top with 3 Handel arias on the concert, and Graun only featured in 1. But it is a really great one. But before we get to Handel and Graun's battle for Janine's heart, Mozart needs a little love. So the concert opens and closes with pieces of Mozart's, both written in the early 1770s. While the concert does straddle the Baroque and Classical eras, all of the Mozart pieces you'll hear tonight were written very early in his career, and all of the music in tonight's concert was written within a span of only 50 years, from 1724 to 1774. The first piece on the concert is Mozart's Symphony No. 21 in A major, the first movement of the symphony, the opening allegro. This was composed in August 1772 and was first performed in Salzburg, Austria, Mozart's birthplace and hometown. Mozart was appointed to be a court musician in Salzburg in 1773, where he worked for 4 years. This symphony was written before that appointment began. It's still considered to be one of Mozart's so-called Salzburg symphonies, a group of about 15 or 16 that were first performed in Salzburg, either right before or during his time as court musician in the city. So the first piece you'll hear, the first movement of Symphony No. 21, was written in 1772, when Mozart, the poster child for child prodigies, was only 16 years old. And this was Symphony No. 21, not Symphony No. 1. He wrote his Symphony No. 1 at only 8 years old, and that was already 2 years into his European concert tour with his father and sister. Beginning in 1762, at only 6 years old, Mozart's father Leopold took him and his sister Nannerl on concert tours through Munich, Vienna, Prague, Paris, Amsterdam, Zurich, London, and more. They returned to their home in Salzburg for a brief period, after which Leopold took his son to Italy for a bit over a year, to Bologna, Rome, Milan, Venice, Padua, and so on, hoping it would lead to Mozart earning gainful employment in one of the city's circles of court musicians. Mozart didn't earn an appointment through that tour, but it did earn him 3 opera commissions: Mithridate in 1770 at only 14 years old, Ascanio in Alba in 1771 at only 15 years old, and Lucio Silla in 1772 at 16 years old. All three written for the Carnival season in Milan. Mozart composed Symphony No. 21 in August of 1772 for Salzburg, when he was home in between trips to Italy. He left for his Lucio Silla in Milan only a few months after this symphony was composed. An extraordinarily prolific composer, particularly for his age at the time, 15-year-old Mozart wrote Ascanio in Alba and 2 symphonies in the calendar year 1771, and 16-year-old Mozart wrote Lucio Silla and 7 different symphonies in the year 1772, among many other concertos, chamber music pieces, and pieces for solo piano during those years as well. While in Milan for his Lucio Silla, Mozart wrote the final piece on tonight's program, a motet in 4 movements titled Exultate Jubilate. And upon returning from Milan, he was finally appointed court musician in his hometown of Salzburg. He wrote dozens of works during his 4 years as court musician there, including the other symphony you'll hear from tonight, Symphony No. 29, also in A major. He composed that in 1774 at 18 years old, and that is actually the latest composed piece on tonight's concert, which spans just those 50 years from 1724 to 1774. So while we're straddling the Baroque and classical eras, we're still very much on the early side of the classical era, which went all the way into the first few years of the 19th century. To give opera lovers some temporal context for these 2 Mozart symphonies, Mozart's most well-known operas, in which he collaborated with Lorenzo da Ponte, were written between 1786 and 1790, between 12 and 18 years after these 2 symphonies. So the concert opens with the first movement of the earlier of the 2 Mozart symphonies, the opening allegro of Symphony No. 21 in A major, written in 1772. And the piece that follows that is the first vocal selection on the concert, and the first of 2 arias from Giulio Cesare, a 1724 opera by composer George Friedrich Handel and librettist Nicola Francesco Haim. This is the earliest written music on tonight's program and comes 14 years into Handel's residency in London. German-born Handel was born in Halle in 1685, studied at the university in Halle, and shortly after moved first to work as a composer and organist in Hamburg. He spent a few years in Hamburg, where he wrote his first 4 Italian operas before spending time in Italy, primarily in Florence, but also in Rome and Venice. In 1710, he moved to London, where he would spend the rest of his life, where he developed the English oratorio in the 1730s, and he focused primarily on that musical genre in the second half of his career. Giulio Cesare, an Italian opera seria, was from the first half of his career. Written in 1724, it was already Handel's 17th opera and his 6th opera out of 11 with librettist Nicola Francesco Haim. The Italian Haim was born in Rome and studied cello, and he moved to London to work as a musician, writer, and theater manager about 7 or 8 years before Handel did. The 2 didn't actually meet in Rome, which would seem reasonable, but they met in London, where they spent a long and fruitful collaboration on Italian opera seria before Haim's death in 1729. Other operas they wrote together include Tamerlano, Ottone, Flavio, and the other Handel opera with music featured in tonight's concert, Rodelinda. Giulio Cesare, their 6th opera together, was one of Handel's first highly successful operas, and one of 3 operas he wrote in only a 12-month period with Haim. Based somewhat on historic events of the Roman Julius Caesar and the Egyptian Cleopatra, the plot revolves around the Roman Civil War. Caesar pursues his enemy Pompeo into Egypt, where Ptolemy rules as king. Caesar intends to spare Pompeo's life, but Ptolemy beheads him, hoping to win Caesar's favor. Pompeo's wife Cornelia and son Sesto vow to avenge his death, and Cleopatra, Ptolemy's sister, decides to join them in order to depose her brother and become sole ruler over Egypt. She seduces Caesar in order to win his help in deposing her brother, but the two do end up falling in love. Caesar is besieged in Cleopatra's palace by her brother's forces, and Cleopatra believes he died when he jumped from a window to escape some soldiers. But he survived his fall, returns to Cleopatra. Pompey's son, Sesto, kills Ptolemy in vengeance, and Caesar proclaims Cleopatra to be queen of Egypt. Da tempeste il legno infranto, also called da tempeste, is translated to when a storm-tossed ship comes safely to harbor, there is nothing left for it to seek, referring to Caesar returning to Cleopatra and to her heart returning to happiness, knowing that Caesar is still alive. Here's what Janine had to say about programming this aria.
Da tempeste is an aria that's quite difficult for me, I have to say. It's a piece that's ever growing with me. But that's one of the reasons why I put it on there, because each time I sing it, it's something different, and I surprise myself each time with what I'm able to do with it. So it's exciting for me. I'm really glad that I put it on there, even though it's quite hard.
Following Da Tempeste, Janine sings Ritorna o Caro from Rodelinda, written in 1725 as the third of the three operas Handel and Haydn wrote together in only a 12-month period. The opera takes place in Lombardy, where Grimoaldo has usurped the throne from the rightful king Bertariro. Rodelinda, the rightful queen, is left with her son Flavio as prisoners to Grimoaldo after her husband Bertariro has fled and gone into hiding. She believes her husband to be dead, though that's only a ruse he's set up in order to get back to the palace and regain his throne. Grimoaldo wants Rodelinda to regain her place as queen by marrying him. She says she will, but only if Grimoaldo murders her son Flavio with his own hands right before her eyes. The usurper is horrified and, as she expected, refuses to commit the murder of a child in front of the child's own mother. A friend and confidant of Rodelinda's husband finds his way to the palace in order to bring her news that her husband is still alive and is coming for her. Though they do meet again that night in a fleeting moment, Grimoaldo finds them and imprisons Bertariro, who Grimoaldo believes to be an unknown lover. Bertariro escapes his prison cell with a little help from his friends and saves Grimoaldo's life from an approaching assassin who wants the throne for himself. Bertariro then spares the usurper Grimoaldo, and Grimoaldo renounces his claim to the throne, and Bertariro and Rodelinda reclaim their rule. The aria Janine sings is right in the middle of the opera, when Rodelinda has just learned that her husband is still alive and she will see him again. When you listen, compare the musical character of Rodelinda's Ritorna o Caro to Cleopatra's Da Tempeste. Both come at the moment when the heroine learns that their love, who they thought to be dead, is still alive. But while Cleopatra's is an exuberant, joyous release while in the presence of her love, Rodelinda's is a contained, anticipatory excitement, having yet to see him. And it only comes in the second act as opposed to Cleopatra's final third act. And the drama isn't over yet, as Rodelinda's husband is about to be taken away from her once more. Ritorna o Caro, while similar in basic plot to Da Tempeste, is in a very different dramatic device and musical character. Here's what Janine said about programming this stunning aria.
Ritorna o Caro is from the opera Rodelinda, also composed by Handel, and I did the full role in Opéra de Lille in France. And this was a particularly changing time in my life, both emotionally and spiritually connected to my music of baroque. And also it was my first major and title role in baroque music professionally. Ritorno o Caro is an aria in Rodelinda where you are finally or beginning to see her this moment in a woman's life where everything has been taken away from her and she has been fighting tooth and nail to maintain her dignity. And finally, she's getting to see her husband in a very short moment. And you get this heartbeat motion in the orchestration that Handel puts there in the music, and you can really feel this longing. You can really feel all of her character in this piece, and for me, I connect strongly with her and in this piece, and no matter if I ever get another chance to program another Baroque concert, the Ritorno au Caro is going to be there.
Following the Rodelinda aria, we return to Mozart Symphony No. 21 in A major, the same symphony we opened the concert with. And here we hear this movement is the fourth and final movement, the closing Allegro. Following that movement, we return to Giulio Cesare and another aria for the character of Cleopatra, where Da Tempeste is in the final moments of the opera when Cleopatra and Caesar are reunited. This next aria that we hear in the concert rewinds us to the second act, when Cleopatra and Caesar are separated. Se Pietà, in my opinion, one of the most breathtakingly beautiful arias in all of the operatic repertoire, comes right as Caesar is besieged in Cleopatra's palace, and he decides to fight his enemy forces. Cleopatra, realizing that she has truly fallen in love with Caesar, prays for the gods to bless him and protect him in battle. Here's Janine on this aria and performing the role of Cleopatra.
Yes, I had the wonderful opportunity to give my role debut as Cleopatra in St. Gallen Theater in Switzerland. And I simply love Se Pietà because just like Ritorno, it is the cusp and it's the beginning point where you see these women start to change in their character. You start to see the development of where they were before, and then you get to this arc, and then it starts to really grow from there, and then you come to the end, where you see these heroines rise from one point to the next. You see Cleopatra as being very jovial, very playful, very witty, almost a comedian. She's playing with Cesare. But now she's gotten to Se Pietà, which is this point where she starts to realize really what she wants, who she wants it with, and why. And she didn't know that really 100% before she was on the wavelength of, I need to take this in order to be on top. But then love started to come into play. And then there's a warmth that starts happening with her in Se Pietà. And then it starts to go into Piangero and all the arias that come after that. So even when you get to Da Tempeste, which I spoke about previously, Da Tempeste, which is also sort of very jovial and playful, but there is a strength in that aria that happens, and that's another reason why I like the two of them to be in the same context or the same performance, because you see the this highlight point, this cusp, and then you see the final point of growth in her final aria with Da Tempeste. I really enjoy Cleopatra because you really see this arc going from, this childlike, jovial, witty, comedian type girl to a woman at the end. And that's something that I think any lady could connect to.
Following Se Pietà, Cleopatra's Act 2 aria from Giulio Cesare, we return again to a Mozart symphony, though this time to the second of the two symphonies featured in the concert. This movement is the fourth and final movement of Symphony No. 29 in A major, the Allegro con spirito. This symphony was composed in 1774 while Mozart was employed as the court musician of Salzburg, also included in the group of symphonies known as Mozart's Salzburg Symphonies. This symphony, while part of those symphonies, is, though, part of something of a transition period for Mozart. It's a bit more mature than the earlier Symphony No. 21 we'll hear on the concert, and it's one of the last symphonies he wrote in this period of his life, before turning primarily to violin and piano concertos for a 3 to 4 year period at the end of his Salzburg employment. Mozart's most famous and most mature symphonies, and most frequently performed symphonies, were written between 1778 and 1788, symphonies that are often referred to by a single name: the Paris Symphony, the Hofner, the Linz, the Prague, or the Jupiter. While these late compositions are recognized as his most mature symphonies, the young Mozart in his Salzburg symphonies displays a sophistication and artistry not found in the most mature symphonies of many others. When you listen to the fourth movement of Symphony number 29, compared stylistically to the first and fourth movements of Symphony number 21, which you'll have already heard in the concert, and see if you can pick up on some of the more complex composition as Mozart transitioned from his Salzburg symphonies to his concerto period to his late symphonies. And after the final orchestra-only piece of the evening, Jeanine sings an aria by her new love affair composer, Karl Heinrich Graun. This aria, Tra le Procelle, is from another opera about the historical events of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, in an opera titled Cesare e Cleopatra. The opera was written in 1742, right in the middle temporally of this concert, and actually was the opera commissioned by King Frederick II of Prussia that opened the Royal Opera House in Berlin, now the Staatsoper unter den Linden, or the Berlin State Opera. This opera has some rather different characters and plot devices from the Handel opera, but the general story is the same. In this aria, Cleopatra is rejecting the romantic advances from Arsace, a character not in the Handel version. She rejects him rather brusquely, saying it's not her fault, it's just how it is, it's just how the world works. The aria is remarkably virtuosic, incredibly fast coloratura, and Janine's performance of this rarely heard piece will be a highlight of the evening. Here's Janine on the Graun aria, Tra le Procelle.
So, as I said before, Graun is a new love of mine. Again, please don't tell Handel. And Tra le Procelle is one of my favorite arias to sing now, because it's just, every singer wants to have that aria, that go-to piece that they can, whether they are warmed up or they're feeling great, they know they can go to that piece anytime. And for me right now, Tra le Procelle is it. It is the piece that I just want to be like, yes, rock on piece. And I have so much fun singing it. The rhythms are great. You can take any tempo with it on any day that you're however you're feeling. And I haven't gotten the opportunity to sing Graun's Cleopatra, but I really hope to one day. He is a composer not to be missed.
The final piece on the program is Mozart's Exsultate Jubilate, the motet we talked about earlier, which he composed at the very end of 1772 and the beginning of 1773, while in Milan for his opera Lucio Silla. He actually composed this for the castrato that was performing in Lucio Silla. It's a motet in 3 aria-like movements with a recitativo secco in between the first 2. It's composed to a liturgical Latin text, but is written like a concert aria, also with very virtuosic and impressive vocal selections. It's a wonderful motet that showcases Janine and the Accio Orchestra in one of young Mozart's great concert pieces. And finally, I asked Janine if she could talk a little bit about the concert and what she wanted you, the audience, to take away from the program tonight.
I really would love the audience to have a sense of healing and a sense of joy after they see this concert. I really hope that we have managed to bring to them a sense of belonging, a sense of longing to see this, to see live music again. And, especially because in Texas, we just had, you guys just had this freeze. And in my country, we had, or the country that I live in now, which is Barbados, we had ashfall from the volcano from St. Vincent and the Grenadines that happened 2 weeks ago. And it has, destroyed homes on my island in Barbados. And it's really a distraught situation in St. Vincent. And all of that, the freeze, the volcano, combined with the pandemic at this moment in time, we really need something good. We just do. And I really hope that the concert brings a smile and a sense of hope, healing, and joy with this music.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight for the pre-show. And now it's time for the concert to go live on Marquee TV and hdo.org/digital. We're so excited for all of you to experience this concert. Remember, if you haven't logged into your accounts, get set up, and the concert is about to begin. Thank you, and please enjoy the show.